1v1 double Cleanliness+Wearing Books+Ancient Martial Arts+Armor Group Pets+Metaphysics+Full Text Aeration, Zhiqi dressed up as a malicious female supporting character. The female protagonist is a true daughter with a vest everywhere. She is a fake daughter who occupies a magpie's nest and constantly frames the female protagonist, ultimately tragically receiving a boxed lunch. Zhiqi. Wearing books cannot stop me from aging. Of course, wearing books is not possible, but poverty can. Zhiqi is forced to open for business. #explosive. Zhiqi, a fake daughter of the Gu family, was swept out of the house and used to be a godly thug under the overpass to cheat money. The main character group's art style has started to go wrong. Brother Gu. Lack of money. This community will give you a ride. Gu Urge. Urge is giving you an entertainment company as a gift. Gu Sanjia. Just earned 1 billion yuan, keep it safe. Gu Zhiqi. Young master, take the prize money from the Champions League. Money obsessed female protagonist. Lack of money. Choose any color card you like. Dear brother. Come back and inherit the family property. Zhiqi said, What about the agreed malicious female supporting script? #explosive. Everyone in the Gu family is a leader in the industry, just a fake daughter with nothing but a face. Then, various big shots called one after another. Boss 1. Our alliance's ancestral site is not better than the feng shui under the overpass. Master Gu, consider it again. Boss 2. Lack of money. Think about the last order. Boss 3. Do you have time to tell fortune, but not time to write papers? Boss 4. Miss Gu, I have a surgery here. Look. Zhiqi. Reviewed, in retirement, do not disturb a certain actor. You just used my account. Did Zhiqi, who had cheated enough money to prepare for retirement, say, Novel keyword. Shocking. Group pet fake Qianjin cries with no pop-ups, shocked. Group pet fake daughter cries for being petite by movie Emperor Big Boss. Download the complete set of TXT, it's amazing. Group pet fake Qianjin cried by movie Emperor Big Boss. Latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. Taking off clothes. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. The source has no content or has errors. Chapter 2. Wearing a malicious supporting actress. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Chapter 2. Wearing a malicious supporting actress. Bang, bang, ah. The sound of fighting accompanied by howls echoed through the entire abandoned oil tank factory. In less than a minute, more than 10 people fell to the ground and couldn't even get up, moaning in pain in their mouths. Who asked you to take the photo? As Zhiqi's voice fell, he moaned even louder, but no one answered Zhiqi. Zhiqi raised his foot and kicked the person closest to him. You say. That person just stood still and pretended to be dead. Upon seeing this, Zhiqi raised his eyebrows slightly, raised his lips slightly, and raised his feet. Ah! A pig-like scream sounded, and the person who was still at Zhiqi's feet just now had slipped 2 meters away, curled up in a ball while covering his pants, and was in excruciating pain. The others immediately covered their crotch when they saw this, huddled together and continued to pretend to be dead. Come on, you say. Zhiqi followed his finger to a person with a lazy and casual expression, and his tone was not as cold as before. Instead, it was tinged with a bit of fatigue and lethality, but no one dares to think so. It's the boss who contacted us, and we don't know who it is either. The accused person didn't hesitate at all and blurted it out. Glancing coolly at the person who spoke, he lifted his foot and walked towards the boss who had already passed out and had flesh and blood between his legs. Crouch down and poke into his pocket. Flip out a phone. The recent call record was 15 minutes ago when Zhiqi pressed the dial button directly. The other party received it quickly and said, "Send me the photos first. Once I receive the photos, I will make the final payment for you." Listening to a somewhat familiar voice, Zhiqi lazily smiled and casually said, "Everyone is acquaintances. Want a photo?" Just come to me directly, okay? Dot. Doodle doodle. After the other party remained silent for a few seconds, they hung up the phone directly. Zhiqi didn't care either, just casually threw his phone onto the boss and walked towards the entrance of the oil tank farm. At the same time, a hint of melancholy and irritability crawled up between the eyebrows. She originally lived on the Water Blue Star, where technology, ancient martial arts, and mysticism were three pillars, and was the youngest 9th-level god on the Water Blue Star. After finally seeing off my master, killing my senior uncle, enduring my senior brother to death, and becoming the leader of the Feng Shui Alliance. Just as I finished writing about the Alliance's future plan and retirement plan, I was killed by the enemy alliance. Death is death, and it's not a clean death, but rather wearing books. Wearing a vest as a female supporting character in a novel. The female protagonist of the novel, Gu Xie, is a true heiress with a plethora of vests. She, on the other hand, uses a malicious female supporting script, occupying a magpie's nest and constantly committing suicide. Despite failing to frame the female protagonist, she is instead slapped in the face. In the end, she tragically receives a fake heiress with a boxed lunch. The original owner is very dedicated, and the plot of the vicious female accompaniment is exactly the same as the plot. Now, the plot has come to an end. The female supporting character has repeatedly framed the female lead, but has been slapped repeatedly, which has exhausted the feelings of the Gu family towards her and completely kicked out of the Gu family. The malice of the original protagonist is true. In addition to framing the female protagonist, he often bullies others by relying on himself as the daughter of the family. Upon learning that she had been kicked out of the house, someone approached the kidnappers to kidnap her and even took nude photos of her. She remembers that in the later plot, after the female lead was gang raped, nude photos were taken all over the internet. She had no choice but to change her face and name, and then came back to continue working. Finally, she was sent by the female lead's younger brother to mine in F Island. Gu Zhiqi let out a soft click. This luck is gone. Let's say she's unlucky, she can still live if she dies. Let's say she's lucky, she dressed up as a female supporting character who dislikes dogs. This is an old abandoned oil tank factory, quite large. Gu Zhiqi walked slowly and took some time to reach the entrance of the oil tank farm. Walking to the door, Gu Zhiqi raised his hand and opened the door. The door was heavy and creaked open. Compared to inside the factory, the light outside is much stronger, so Gu Zhiqi instinctively raised his hand to block it. The light was glaring, and the stuffy feeling rushed towards me, making me gasp for breath. Before even having a chance to see the outside scene clearly, suddenly there was a whirlwind. Gu Zhiqi's eyes darkened and he fainted directly. Before falling down, I vaguely saw several people in black combat uniforms raising their guns at her. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Hospitals, Arguments. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3 Hospitals, Arguments. Haicheng. Hospitals. The weather in mid-August is very hot, with heat waves covering up one after another, but it cannot cover the sound of arguments in Ward 107. Zhang Xiuli, what do you mean? It was agreed earlier that you should take care of Gu Zhiqi and I should take care of Gu Qingyan. What's wrong with you now? The woman's voice was cold, with a hint of anger in her suppressed tone, but more of it was indifference. She is Gu Bo's daughter, who do you care for if you don't? Zhang Xiuli was carrying a branded handbag, wearing various precious jewelry, and perming her delicate curly hair. She didn't look at Tang Yun, but slightly lowered her head and stared at her newly made nails. Her tone was all harsh and indifferent, and her attitude was even colder than Tang Yun's. She's Gu Bo's daughter, isn't she yours? Compared to Zhang Xiuli, Tang Yun dressed much more plainly. Her clothes were wrinkled and had turned pale from washing. She dressed very ordinary, with a slightly yellowish complexion and tired eyebrows, but she still tried to lift her spirits. Previously, Gu Xie's guardians were you and Gu Bo. Now that Gu Xie is looking back at home, Gu Zhiqi's guardians should also be you and Gu Bo. Zhang Xiuli's expression remained unchanged, and her attitude was also very firm. In other words, she refused to take care of Gu Zhiqi. Is she your daughter or my daughter? Why should I take care of her? Tang Yun became even angrier, gripping the corners of her clothes tightly. You knew about Gu Bo's current situation, but you still threw Gu Zhiqi at me. Do you have any intention? That's your own daughter. Listening to Tang Yun's words, a hint of impatience flashed between Zhang Xiuli's eyebrows. Anyway, I won't raise her. She is Gu Bo's daughter, and now that you are Gu Bo's wife, you should raise her. If you don't raise her, okay, let her look back at home. You clearly know that the Gu family has. It is not a secret for Gu Zhiqi to be driven out by the Gu family in Haiqing. Although neither Zhang Xiuli nor Tang Yun are from Haiqing, the Gu family has already called to inform them to come and pick them up. A few times before, both sides made excuses to push it over. But this time, the Gu family issued an ultimatum that no matter who, they must pick up the person within 3 days. And today, it happens to be the 3rd day. Listening to Tang Yun's words, Zhang Xiuli's expression remained indifferent, with no intention of letting go. She and Gu Bo have been divorced for 5 years. When she remarried, she didn't even take her own son with her. Now, how could she raise Gu Zhiqi? If Gu Zhiqi's original score is not enough, after all, it was carefully cultivated by a wealthy family like the Gu family. Not to mention that she has learned everything about music, chess, calligraphy, and painting. Just that face, standing there like a vase, can bring her a lot of value. When she first learned that she was holding the wrong child, she did have the heart to take her to the Yu family. But she is too capable. Even the Gu family cannot be controlled. She can't afford such a daughter. Tang Yun knew what Zhang Xiuli meant by her attitude, but Gu Zhiqi didn't want to take care of her either, and it wasn't her own daughter. Moreover, the current situation at her home made adding an extra pair of chopsticks a burden. Gu Zhiqi's reputation has spread to Yueqi village, and she doesn't have time to serve a young lady. Since that's the case, let Gu Zhiqi choose for himself. Tang Yun gritted her teeth and said coldly to Zhang Xiuli. After Zhang Xiuli and Gu Bo divorced, she turned around and married into the wealthy family of Yancheng. As long as Gu Zhiqi is smarter and according to her temperament, she will definitely choose Zhang Xiuli. Zhang Xiuli's face cooled visibly as she listened to Tang Yun's words. Obviously, her thoughts were the same as Tang Yun's, and she believed that Gu Zhiqi would choose her. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been relying on the Gu family all along. Let her choose. It's useless for her to choose, I won't take care of her. Upon hearing this, Tang Yun ignored Zhang Xiuli and let her choose for herself. Just turned around and realized. The girl on the bed woke up at some point. End of this chapter. Chapter 4 Gu Zhiqi. Not selected. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4 Gu Zhiqi. Not selected. The person on the bed sat up at some point, lazily leaning against the head of the bed. A pair of deep and hazy eyes looked at the two of them with a lazy and casual expression, with a hint of playfulness and indulgence in their eyes. Are you awake? Gu Zhiqi's eyes are too beautiful and too deep, as if they can see through people at a glance. Subconsciously, Tang Yun felt a bit guilty. But on second thought, she had nothing to feel guilty about. After Tang Yun figured it out, she calmed down and said, "Since you're awake, you should have heard what you said earlier. You can choose." Zhang Xiuli's expression became even colder as she listened to Tang Yun's words. She turned her gaze to Gu Zhi's residence, her eyes filled with resistance and disgust. "Don't choose me, choose your father. Even if you choose me, you won't be raised," she said. "You may not understand that your father is completely paralyzed now, and I have to support your younger brother's education alone. I also have a son to support and serve your father, so don't expect me to support you." Tang Yun told Gu Zhiqi about the situation at home with a cold expression and a calm tone, while his hand, which was clutching the corner of his clothes, exerted even more force. Even if you choose me, I won't take care of you, Zhang Xiuli said coldly, holding her arm, with a cold and harsh expression on her face. Looking at Gu Zhiqi's gaze, it was like looking at garbage, disdainful and disdainful, unable to tell at all that Gu Zhiqi was her own daughter. Gu Zhiqi woke up for a while, and she listened to their conversation for a long time. I also have a rough idea of their identities. Zhang Xiuli, the biological mother of the original owner. Tang Yun, the stepmother of the original owner. The original owner was kicked out by the Gu family, and currently neither of them is willing to support the original owner. Tang Yun's attitude towards her can be understood by Gu Zhiqi, but Zhang Xiuli this kind of mother, who wants it? Anyway, she doesn't want it. No choice. Gu Zhiqi finally spoke, his tone relaxed, and he lazily yawned after speaking. Listening to Gu Zhiqi's words, both of them were taken aback. After being stunned, Zhang Xiuli spoke up first and her voice suddenly rose. Do you still want to go find the Gu family? Gu Zhiqi, please point your face. The Gu family doesn't want you anymore. If you dare to go back again, both your father and I will be finished. You can just die on your own, can you not implicate me? Ah. The more you said, the more sharp and sarcastic his tone became. Finally, he reached out his hand directly to poke Gu Zhiqi's head. Gu Zhiqi stared at her fingers with a faint expression and said, "Get lost." What are you? What are you saying? Zhang Xiuli poked Gu Zhiqi's hand and stared at him with wide eyes. Gu Zhiqi raised his eyebrows lightly, his expression carefree and lazy. He opened his lips again and spoke in a round tone, I said, "Get lost." You've gone crazy. How did you talk to me? That's how the Gu family taught you. Ah. Zhang Xiuli said, raising her hand and about to slap Gu Zhiqi. Gu Zhiqi grabbed Zhang Xiuli's hand. Ah. Zhang Xiuli's arm was removed and she let out a sharp and piercing scream. Gu Zhiqi. You little bastard, how dare you? Zhang Xiuli was interrupted before she could finish speaking. Come on, calm down. With a lazy and scattered voice, Zhang Xiuli's head was drenched with another glass of water. Water drips down from the top of the head, instantly forming a chicken coop with delicate curls. Gu Zhiqi casually placed the paper cup in his hand back on the bedside table. I don't know who was so kind and poured a glass of water on the bedside. Ah. As the water dripped down, the piercing screams echoed through the entire ward once again. Zhang Xiuli was only stunned for a few seconds. After regaining her senses, she screamed and went crazy to scratch Gu Zhiqi. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. How dare you even beat your own mother? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. How dare you even beat your own mother? Gu Zhiqi. Little slut. See if I don't kill you. Gu Zhiqi dodged Zhang Xiuli's paw and rewarded her with a kick. Zhang Xiuli was kicked and sat down on the ground. She wanted to get up, but it was too painful. She couldn't get up for a while, so she decided not to get up. She sat on the ground, crying and cursing. You're a broom, even your own mother dares to fight. No wonder the Gu family doesn't want you. You won't be able to follow me into the Yu family, you've been beaten 1,000 times. I shouldn't have kept you back then, I should have strangled you to death. I cursed out any unpleasant words. Sitting on the ground without any image, sweeping away the image of a noble woman, sitting on the ground like a street slut and continuing to curse. Gu Zhiqi ignored the air directly. Tang Yun on the side was stunned. She knew that Zhang Xiuli was careless. However, she did not expect that, despite being a mother and daughter, they were even more incompatible than their enemies. Standing on the side, staring blankly at the farce in front of me. She had never seen Gu Zhiqi before, this was her first time seeing him. The impression of Gu Zhiqi, apart from those rumors, is the beautiful face she had when she first met. I've heard about her bad temper for a long time, but now how dare she even beat her own mother? Tang Yun instinctively took several steps back. Zhang Xiuli's curses never stopped, like a machine gun, constantly popping and popping. The voice grew louder and louder, and in the end, it directly attracted the nurse. 107, be quiet, it's affecting other patients. Zhang Xiuli's curse was interrupted, and she turned around and glared at the nurse with displeasure, her face full of anger. Do you know who I am? I am the wife of the Yu family in Yancheng. How dare you speak to me like that? The nurse pursed her lips and spoke displeased, I don't care who you are. If you make any noise, I'll just call the security guard. After speaking, she glared at Zhang Xiuli and quickly left. Who? What are you, dare you interfere with me? Before he could finish cursing, he was hit by an empty paper cup, and his subsequent words were interrupted. Zhang Xiuli turned her head and looked angrily at Gu Zhiqi, who was smashing her with a paper cup. You little slut, how dare you smash me? Someone should have raped you. Why don't you? Speak clearly, look at the camera and curse. Gu Zhiqi lifted his eyelids and held up his phone directly at Zhang Xiuli, speaking. What are you doing? Zhang Xiuli raised her voice. Let netizens take a look at Mrs. Yu's upbringing. Come on, don't stop, continue cursing. Yancheng Yu family. Marrying such a thing. My eyes are covered in feces, right? Zhang Xiuli listened to Gu Zhiqi's words and her pupils narrowed. You. Don't take photos. If it's captured, then it's okay. Originally, marrying into the Yu family, there were many people in the wealthy circles of Yancheng who mocked and mocked her. Her mother-in-law has always looked down on her, and if they see her like this, they will have to use the topic to show off. Zhang Xiuli gritted her teeth, propped herself up on the ground with one hand, and stood up crookedly, dragging her removed arm as she rushed towards Gu Zhiqi. Give me your phone, she said, don't be afraid to have your other arm removed, just come. Gu Zhiqi lazily leaned against the head of the bed while holding up his phone. His gaze fell on Zhang Xiuli's arm and he spoke calmly. Upon hearing this, Zhang Xiuli stopped and instinctively took a few steps back. Gu Zhiqi, why are you so vicious? I'm your mother. White-eyed wolves, indeed, those who haven't been raised by their side. If you don't want the video to appear online, just roll away immediately. Gu Zhiqi's eyebrows tinged with a hint of impatience, interrupting Zhang Xiuli's words. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. City Bureau Visitors. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6 City Bureau Visitors. Upon seeing this, Zhang Xiuli stopped talking. Afraid of Gu Zhiqi really posting online, he instinctively took a step back and said, if you dare to post it, I won't finish with you. After speaking harshly, I was about to leave. I scanned Tang Yun beside me and gave her a fierce glance. You also saw how she treated me. I can't afford to raise such a daughter, I said without waiting for Tang Yun to say anything. He turned around and strode away. Tang Yun moved her lips and shouted loudly at Zhang Xiuli's back, I don't care either. Zhang Xiuli didn't care so much and left the ward without looking back. Tang Yun saw that she had really left, so she lifted her steps and chased after her. Zhang Xiuli and Tang Yun left, and the ward fell silent again. Gu Zhiqi raised his hand and pressed his forehead, finally feeling clean. Undoubtedly, she is a female supporting character who is disliked by people and disliked by parents. Dang dang dang, the door of the ward was knocked on, and at that time Gu Zhiqi was watching a food program with the original owner's phone. Gu Zhiqi stared straight at his phone and didn't lift his head when he heard a knock on the door. He just lazily and perfunctorily said, come in. Click, the door of the ward was pushed open, and a few people walked in. Gu Zhiqi, the police said, let me ask you a few questions. The nurse saw that Gu Zhiqi was completely focused on her phone screen and reminded her. Gu Zhiqi finally had the willingness to shift his gaze away from his phone. Looking at the 5 extra people in the room, Gu Zhiqi fell silent. Later on, she realized that the nurse had told her earlier that the police had taken her to the hospital and that someone would come to ask questions later. In my mind, there was a scene of someone holding a gun at her before fainting. Judging from their attire, those people look a bit like special police officers. Does the police need 4 people for questioning? Hello little girl, we are from Haicheng City Bureau. My name is Lu Haichuan, and I have a few questions about the kidnappers in the western suburbs factory. Lu Haichuan spoke first, with a calm tone and a hint of caution. I heard that when the little girl was taken to the hospital, her clothes were broken. Although she was not successful, I don't know if she left any psychological shadow. Gu Zhiqi nodded lightly and casually placed his phone aside. But when the nurse left, no one else had the intention of leaving, and 4 more men suddenly appeared in the ward. Gu Zhiqi raised his eyes slightly and glanced at the few people in front of him. Lu Haichuan, dressed in police uniform. A burly young man dressed in black and wearing sunglasses, looking like a bodyguard. Next to her stood a doctor in a white coat, with a delicate and elegant appearance. However, there was a clear disgust in her gaze, indicating that she knew the original owner. Finally, there was a young man in a suit and leather shoes, with a handsome appearance. Undoubtedly, he was the most eye-catching, not because of his outstanding appearance compared to the other 3, but because there was a black aura entwined between his eyebrows. Seeing that Gu Zhiqi had an occupational disease, he almost blurted out the phrase, "You're going to die." However, considering the current situation, the words on my lips were restrained. The burly young man saw Gu Zhiqi nodding, so he opened the prepared notebook and sat down on the chair next to the hospital bed. Lu Haichuan began to ask Gu Zhiqi, "Can you still remember yesterday's events? Can you recall them once?" Gu Zhiqi let out a secret click. "Why did you exhaust your energy and faint, and still be encountered by the police?" "Excuse me." Gu Zhiqi lowered his eyes slightly and said, "I can't remember the ones in front very clearly. When I realize it, they are tearing at my clothes." The girl on the hospital bed, wearing loose medical clothes, made her figure even thinner, with cold white skin and delicate face. She lowered her eyes slightly and calmly talked about what happened last night. Faced with what happened last night, there was no panic or fear, just an indifferent look as I reminisced. It looks cold and indifferent. It seems that she is just an observer of yesterday's event. A bystander without emotions. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Are you my son or my grandson? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Are you my son or my grandson? In the ward, there were only the voices of young girls. After the girl finished speaking, there was silence in the ward. Only the young people who take notes have never stopped recording. Are you saying that those people were all brought down by you? Lu Haichuan's face was full of disbelief. Gu Zhiqi nodded. She. The doctor in the white coat sneered and spoke with a strange tone, Gu Zhiqi, falsifying records is legally responsible. Listening to Ling Mufeng's words, Lu Haichuan frowned slightly. Ling Mufeng is a famous psychologist in Haicheng. They invited him over today to help the little girl overcome her psychological trauma. Why? And mock the little girl. Listening to Ling Mufeng's words, Gu Zhiqi was too lazy to pay attention and looked at Lu Haichuan lazily asking, "Do you have any more questions? Are you sure you really knocked down more than 10 of them?" Lu Haichuan didn't believe it at all. A little girl knocked down more than 10 big men, teasing. I dare not act like this in movies. Gu Zhiqi didn't care about Lu Haichuan's disbelief, but simply replied calmly, I've practiced it. Have you practiced? Ling Mufeng sneered again, how come I don't know you've practiced? Can you use your brain when deceiving people? Ling Mufeng's words made all the people present change their faces. Lu Haichuan instinctively glanced at the young man beside him and saw him frown, his heart thumping. If I had known earlier, I wouldn't have contacted Ling Mufeng. First, take your own brain with you, Gu Zhiqi mocked and retorted calmly. Are you my son or my grandson? Do you still need to know whether I practice or not? You. Mr. Ling, please don't disturb the case. The man who had been bowing down to record looked up and gave Ling Mufeng a faint glance. Upon hearing this, Ling Mufeng immediately became solemn and apologized, sorry. Then he glared fiercely at Gu Zhiqi. Gu Zhiqi didn't even give him a glance. The young man in a suit and leather shoes turned his gaze to Gu Zhi's residence and spoke, could you please recall it again? As soon as the young man spoke, Lu Haichuan gave him a strange glance, but he had no objection to it. Ling Mufeng moved his lips, but thinking of the other person's identity, he finally restrained the words on his lips. Gu Zhiqi's eyes flickered with a hint of impatience, it was indeed quite troublesome. However, inspired to be a good citizen, Gu Zhiqi still reminisced once again. Throughout the journey, Ling Mufeng did not restrain his mocking gaze, wishing to directly use a mocking skill to attack Gu Zhiqi's face, while Gu Zhiqi ignored him throughout the journey. After listening to Gu Zhiqi's memories, the hospital room once again fell into a brief silence. Police uncle, with so many of them, I hit more than 10 of them all by myself, which inevitably led to excessive defense, isn't it? Gu Zhiqi recalled, changing his lazy and indifferent demeanor and looking at Lu Haichuan with a well-behaved and harmless expression, asking this sentence. Lu Haichuan. Thinking of the miserable situation of those people, Lu Haichuan fell silent. The leader, his lower body has become flesh and blood blurred, and he hasn't woken up yet. Other people are not doing much better either, they have broken hands or feet. If you're telling the truth, it's considered legitimate defense, said the young man in a suit and leather shoes. Seeing the young man answer, Lu Haichuan also comforted Gu Zhiqi and said, yes, with the words of fourth master, you can rest assured. This time, multiple major cases were also involved, and Chang Yingjun directly intervened and took over with full authority. He was just accompanying me today. In this case, he had almost no say, but fourth master had absolute say. Upon hearing this, Gu Zhiqi glanced at the young man. Fourth master. I have a slight impression. It seems to be a male supporting character. The young man was slightly turning his head to look at the burly young man and said, Yun Yan, have you all taken note? Yun Yan nodded. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Has been kicked out of the Gu family. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 has been kicked out of the Gu family, then go and have a match with third brother. The kidnapper's transcript is under the responsibility of the third brother. Is Gu Zhiqi lying? Just match the notes of those kidnappers. Okay, Yun Yan responded, pinched the note, and went out with his phone. Listening to fourth master's words, Lu Haichuan understood his meaning. Soon, it will be known whether the little girl is lying. However, he still held a skeptical attitude in his heart. It's impossible for a little girl to defeat a dozen strong men, it's absolutely impossible. Lu Haichuan doesn't believe it, and Ling Mufeng doesn't believe it even more. I have already begun to fantasize. After Gu Zhiqi was exposed for his lies, he will regret it and cry bitterly. Is there anything else? This time, Gu Zhiqi asked the person named Fourth Master. It can be seen that this Fourth Lord is in charge. The Fourth Master listened to Gu Zhiqi's question, raised his eyebrows, looked back at Gu Zhiqi, and said, is it called Gu Zhiqi? Gu Zhiqi. Isn't this nonsense? I don't know, my name is Gu Zhiqi, how did you come to find me? After understanding the meaning in Gu Zhiqi's eyes, Fourth Master coughed lightly to conceal his embarrassment, and then continued to ask casually, is it from the Gu family in Haicheng? The genuine and fake precious melons of the Gu family in Haicheng have been stir-fried very hot recently. He is also a melon-eating crowd, I have heard of it a bit. Upon hearing this, Gu Zhiqi lazily yawned and did not answer fourth master's words. Xiao Gu, fourth master is asking you a question. Seeing this, Lu Haichuan wished he could answer for Gu Zhiqi. However, he didn't know and had to remind Gu Zhiqi. Sorry, I won't answer any personal questions, Gu Zhiqi lazily replied, then raised his hand and rested it on the back of his head, looking lazy and laughing lazily. The fourth master raised his eyebrows when he saw this. This expression reminded him of an acquaintance. Has Tang Xiao also heard of her? Ling Mufeng immediately intervened when Tang Yichen asked. Tang Yichen raised his eyebrows and looked at Ling Mufeng. He could see that this guy didn't deal with this little girl, obviously he knew each other. She has already been kicked out of the Gu family. Ling Mufeng did not conceal his disgust and hostility towards Gu Zhiqi at all. Just 3 days ago, when he was still on the brink of death, he threatened the Gu family with suicide. Gu Zhiqi said, Why does this look more and more like a top? I owe you smoking. Upon hearing this, Tang Yichen coughed lightly and then calmly glanced at Gu Zhiqi. Eating melons in front of the parties involved it feels a bit subtle. Seeing Gu Zhiqi's expression still lazy and expressionless, Tang Yichen expressed doubts about the rumors. Some people may appear gentle on the surface, but in reality, they have a snake and scorpion heart. Today, they tear off the clothes of the true daughter, and tomorrow, they will be drugged by the true daughter. That's why the true daughter is smart and has avoided them all. Ling Mufeng, seeing that Tang Yichen was not averse to his words, immediately let go and began to criticize others, both openly and secretly mocking them. Lu Haichuan. Am I hiring a psychologist? Can it really heal the psychological shadow of a little girl? Are you really here to increase the psychological shadow area for the little girl? Cough, Dr. Ling, please say a few words less. Lu Haichuan coughed lightly, with a tone of persuasion. Some people are shameless and afraid of being criticized. You don't know, Qianjin plays the piano, she also plays, and plays the same song. In the end, it's not her who embarrasses herself in public. Ling Mufeng continued to exude a strange aura, inspiring Tang Yichen to share the story of Gu Zhiqi framing Gu Xia and being beaten in the face. Gu Zhiqi was driven out of the Gu family, and it was precisely when she was in dire straits that she inevitably wanted to climb the ranks of power and attach importance. Tang Yichen has a noble status. If Gu Zhiqi really climbed up, wouldn't it be a cheap deal for her? End of this chapter. Has anyone praised you in chapter 9? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Has anyone praised you in chapter 9? Lu Haichuan leaned over to Ling Mufeng and lowered his voice, whether it's true or false, after all, she's a little girl. She just experienced that kind of thing, you. Be careful. You don't need to pay attention to people with thicker skin than the city walls. If it weren't for the boss's prowess, he would have been ruined by this dead green tea pit a long time ago. The more I think about it, the angrier I become in my heart. I continue to mock recklessly. I always feel that she can do things that a true daughter can do on her own. If a true daughter can fight against 10, she will make up a plan for herself to fight against 10. Lu Haichuan. Done. He didn't know if the little girl had any psychological shadows before, but now she must have. Lu Haichuan couldn't figure out how Dr. Ling, who had a refined and gentle appearance, could quickly become a yin and yang person when mocking others. This is the first time I've seen such a shameless person, Ling Mufeng continued to output. Tang Yichen listened and looked at Gu Zhiqi, then at Ling Mufeng. Ling Mufeng's firepower is fully activated, and Gu Zhiqi's side has no response. Seems quite calm. Thinking it was because of my own questioning, I felt a sense of guilt in my heart. So, Dr. Ling, right? Tang Yichen spoke, interrupting Ling Mufeng's continuous output. After all, it's just a rumor, and it's hard to hear. Tang Xiao, you don't know about this. These are not just hearsay, they are all what I have seen with my own eyes. Of course, Ling Mufeng did not see it with his own eyes, and many things were said by people in the group. However, some of them were indeed witnessed by him with his own eyes. Now, Tang Yichen didn't know what to say either. She doesn't even have face, why should I, hiss, before Ling Mufeng could finish speaking, a mobile phone flew over and hit him in the face with a pop. Banging, after hitting him in the face, the phone landed and made a dull noise. Ling Mufeng was momentarily stunned, but when he reacted, he suddenly turned his head and looked at Gu Zhiqi, his eyes filled with anger. You. Has anyone praised your mouth? Looks like a exploded chrysanthemum. Before Ling Mufeng could scold him, Gu Zhiqi casually spoke up. Tang Yichen, lying in bed, cheating. The little girl dares to say that. You. You're vulgar. Ling Mufeng clearly understood Gu Zhiqi's words. You think you're very elegant, each mouthful shameless. Gu Zhiqi lazily sat at the head of the bed, his expression still lazy. What I'm saying is not true. Dare you say, haven't you torn Miss Gu's banquet dress? Dare you say you haven't drugged her? Ling Mufeng was hit and his anger skyrocketed. That look, I wish I could just give Gu Zhiqi Lingqi a look. I dare to blow up your dog's head, do you believe it or not? I don't know when the girl on the bed has already lifted the blanket, one foot slightly bent and stepped on the bed, the other foot has already stepped on the slippers on the ground, sitting crookedly by the bed, with a hint of rebellion on her eyebrows. Upon hearing this, Ling Mufeng snorted lightly and said, I don't hit girls. He recently selected this year's excellent doctor, but he shouldn't dirty his feathers just because he hit her. Unilateral beating, no need for you to do it. Gu Zhiqi smiled lazily and awkwardly, rolling up his sleeves and standing by the hospital bed. Besides, you don't have a chance either. Not using the phone will. You. Cough, that's not good for a fight, Lu Haichuan said with a stern face, trying to persuade them. If you really want to fight, I'll just arrest them. A victim girl and a psychologist never expected the two of them to argue. Gu Zhiqi listened to Lu Haichuan's words and temporarily rested his mind on exploding Ling Mufeng's dog head. Wearing slippers, he walked up to Ling Mufeng and stood still. His smile was lazy and unrestrained, and his eyebrows were even more rebellious, just staring at Ling Mufeng. The more Tang Yichen looked, the more he felt that his expression seemed to be similar. Ling Mufeng suppressed his urge to hit someone and took 2 steps back, away from Gu Zhiqi. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Final comparison results. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10 Final comparison results. Gu Zhiqi picked up his phone and lazily glanced at Ling Mufeng, cursing, stupid, before turning around and returning to the bedside. Ling Mufeng secretly gritted his teeth, feeling frustrated in his heart. We can't fight now, but sooner or later we'll clean up this dead green tea. Lu Haichuan breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that the two did not fight. Gu Zhiqi returned to the bed, pinched the needle, and started thrusting it back into his hand. This scene happened to be seen by Lu Haichuan, who then realized that the little girl had just pulled out a needle to pick up her phone. You little girl, why do you randomly inject yourself? Lu Haichuan walked over and took a look. It was discovered that Gu Zhiqi had already pricked the needle. Just as he was about to say a few words to Gu Zhiqi, Tang Yichen took the lead and said, Gu Xiaoqi, since you are a fake daughter, have your biological parents found you? Gu Zhiqi. I lifted my eyelids and glanced at Tang Yichen. Gu Xiaoqi. Gu Zhiqi corrected. Tang Yichen said, I know. Doesn't this seem close? Well, that's not the point. You answer my question first, Tang Yichen said urgently. The more it looks, maybe it really has something to do with it. Gu Zhiqi responded perfunctorily. Who is the other party? From the countryside, my ancestral home is Yueqi village, Gu Zhiqi tilted his head for a moment and casually said. She remembers the village name as Yueqi village. Upon hearing this, Tang Yichen felt somewhat disappointed, as if it was just a coincidence. However, Yueqi village. What's your father's surname? Gu. Gu Xie's surname is Gu, and the original owner's father should also have the surname Gu. It seems like his name is Guda. Gu Bo Gu Debo. Anyway, it's not important. What is your parents' name? What do they do? Did you check your household registration? Gu Zhiqi raised his eyebrows and looked at Tang Yichen. Didn't it feel quite cold just now? Why suddenly became a broken mouth? Tang Yichen said, That, curious. After Tang Yichen finished speaking, he stopped speaking and quickly returned to his high cold demeanor. Big brother said, you should be serious when working, and you can't break your lips. I dare not say, it's not because I despise poverty and love wealth. Some people began to speak harshly. Gu Zhiqi heard it and didn't pay attention. He just thought to himself, it's not good to lift someone else's spiritual cover in front of the police. At this moment, the door of the ward was pushed open. Fourth master, the comparison is good. It was Yun Yan who returned after finishing the phone call. Upon hearing Yun Yan's words, 3 men in the ward looked at him together. Ling Mufeng glanced at Yun Yan's expression, wanting to see why, but Yun Yan remained expressionless. However, this also indicates that there should be discrepancies in the comparison. Thinking about it, I glanced at Gu Zhiqi and began to look forward to Gu Zhiqi crying and admitting his mistake. Make her arrogant. Let her show off. Let her make up nonsense. Later, she will be crying. The more I thought about it, the more excited I couldn't hide, and I began to wonder how to mock her later. Is the comparison good? Tang Yichen's eyes moved slightly. Yun Yan nodded and handed the comparison result to Tang Yichen, while calmly glancing at Gu Zhiqi. Tang Yichen took the phone and didn't forget to ask, have those people recognized the photos? I've recognized it, it's her. Tang Yichen stared at his phone with a slightly complicated expression. How's it going? Lu Haichuan immediately leaned forward to look. Ling Mufeng also stretched his neck to look. I just said, it's all fabricated, right? I knew, the dog can't change it. The following words arrived abruptly upon seeing the words on the phone. Final comparison result. The criminal's comprehensive statement is consistent with the victim's statement. End of this chapter.